Good morning. And you must build this world from love. And if we build this world from love, then God will build this world from love. Olam chesed yibaneh. Olam chesed yibaneh. Olam chesed
Welcome, everyone. Just a reminder that we are recording this session. That was Rabbi Menachem Creditor. Some of you may know him. He's the scholar in residence at the UJA Federation in New York and a close friend and colleague. Some of you may have missed at the beginning of that song why he wrote it. He wrote it just after the Twin Towers in 2001, when one of his children had just been born. And he said that he wrote this piece in the wake of the disaster, the Twin Towers, hoping that the world in which that child and our children would grow up would be a world of love. And in Hebrew, it's Olam Chesed Yibaneh, and that a world of kindness and love and loving kindness will be built. And he rendered it, he translated it saying, well, that will only happen if I make a commitment to do it and you make a commitment to do it, and that one by one, we decide that that is the type of world that we want to live in, and that's the type of world that we are going to participate in co-creating. That is from the 89th Psalm. And I do think if you have not yet studied or read the Psalms, there are 150 of them. You may recall that we included in our initial session Psalm 139. This was Psalm 89. There are multiple expressions of relating to God personally that are expressed in the Psalms. So that if perhaps you at some point are looking for any sort of inspiration for articulating your own personal theology, Psalms would be a wonderful source for you to consider. I don't know if you are familiar on Zoom with polls. Have you ever taken polls in your Zoom room? All right. Well, we're going to try one. This is a poll, and what I will do, I will launch it, and hopefully you will see it, and you will be able to vote. And you should know that this is anonymous. No one is going to know. Let's see. I think I have muted everyone. If I haven't. Okay. So anyway, you're going to be receiving this poll. And if for whatever reason it's not clear to you how to respond to it, don't worry about it. But you should know that it's anonymous. No one will know who voted what. Do you see a poll in front of you now? Okay.
Yes.
And obviously there's no right or wrong answer here. All right, I'm gonna close it in 15 seconds. Then you will be able to see the results as well. And here we go. End poll. Do you see the results? All right. This is a tool that I find personally very helpful in utilizing Zoom because this way I can get a sense of how folks are responding to some of the readings and figure out perhaps and fine tune over the course of time which readings are most successful and most helpful in understanding a subject. All right. Now, my hope is that in addition to everyone being able to utilize the Zoom link today, that you received other materials. Did you? Did you receive something that says developing a personal theology and all of the sessions 1 to 4? Did you all get that? Yes?
I didn't.
Okay. Excellent. In case anybody didn't, in a little bit, I can put this in the chat. I can perhaps even do that right now. Okay, one moment. So it is now in the chat. So you should be able to download it in case you didn't get it.
How do you do that?
Do you go to the, can you go to the chat?
I am, yes.
All right, and you should see in the chat where it says developing a personal theology. And it should have a little icon next to it that says Word, or it says W, which is the sign for Microsoft Word, and you should be able to. It should say click to open.
Mine doesn't have developing a personal theology. It just has
mine.
Katzew.
It's not there.
It's in mine. I don't know why it isn't in others, but
Okay. I'll listen though. Don't worry about it.
you know what? Wait a second. Now I see why. Excuse me. It went to a particular person rather than everybody. 1 second. I will do this again. All right. One moment. All right. Here we go. How about now?
That's it. Now I see
There we
something.
go.
And you
Okay.
click on that.
You should be able to click.
Click, click to open.
I don't know how to do chat, so I'm not getting it.
All right. Well, if you don't worry about it,
Okay.
I will also show it on my screen, so you'll have multiple ways of getting it. I just wanted to send you, and we'll make sure with the office at WRT that everyone will have direct access to the entire packet of materials for our sessions. All right, so let's join together, please, in the blessing for sacred study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praised are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, who has given us mitzvot and commanded us to engage in words of Torah. I want to know, first of all, are there any sort of lingering questions from the last session? If there are, you should always feel comfortable in raising them. Remember, what we did was, in an overarching sense, start with the premise that all theology is reducible to autobiography, and that as a case we looked at several cases in point, one of which, and the primary one of which, was Rabbi Laura Geller, who wrote an essay with that exact title. And she cited particular instances in her life that were critical upon reflection in generating her theology, which grew over time, from the time that she was a very young child until the time that she had actually just retired from her position as one of the first, if not the first, woman in the Reform movement to serve as a senior rabbi in a large, prestigious, distinguished Kehillah congregation, in this case, outside of Los Angeles. You should have also received a page from the epilogue of Rabbi Dr. Bradley Artson's book, God of Becoming and Relationships, in which, in the epilogue, he is writing to his son who has autism. And we're going to take a look at that particular reflection today. We just heard at the beginning of this session Rabbi Menachem Creditor, who, again, reflecting on the birth of a child, which still, I would argue, is the ultimate act of faith. When you bring a child into the world, that is a statement that somehow life is worth not just living, but perpetuating. Lamrot hakol, despite all that we may be suffering from and challenged by, we're still saying it's worth it. And that leads me to mention another one of the experiences in my life personally that shaped my developing and ongoing theology. When I became a rabbi and was ordained in 1983, I interviewed at several different kehilot, several different congregations, and ultimately became the rabbi and educator at Community Synagogue in Port Washington, New York. I only remember one question that I was asked in the interview. And I remember even the name of the person who asked the question ended up being a person who, a little later in life, one of her children became a rabbi himself. This person is no longer alive, but it was a woman. And she said to me, and this was approximately this time of year, as you probably know, this is the time of interviews taking place for rabbis and cantors and assistants and rabbi educators, etc. And she said, Rabbi Katzew, I want you to imagine that it's Yom Kippur and you are giving the sermon on Kol Nidre. What's your sermon title? And I didn't hesitate. And if I were asked that question, I don't think I would hesitate now. And I think I would have given yesterday the same response as I did 43 years ago. It was just two words, and it's from the book of Deuteronomy, Uvacharta b'chayim, which translates to choose life. And the reason I'm sharing that with you is, I hope, somewhat obvious. It is a key phrase from Torah, and it also is very personal. First of all, the word itself is directed in the second person plural. You, uvacharta, you personally, not vous voyez, but tout voyez, not all of you, but you choose life. That it's a personal choice, and it's a choice. And for me, that was and is a guiding principle that is theological. That I hear that as coming from God, as a mitzvah, as a command, not a suggestion, not a recommendation, but as a command that comes from a being that for me is greater than me, greater than all of us, and it is directed to me personally. Now, this doesn't make it right for anyone else, but I think for me, it's another artifact, another piece of evidence that over the course of a life, we each develop a theology that guides who we are in the world, how we walk in the world, how we make decisions that range from how we relate to doctors, how we take vacations, where we live, what we save money for, that all of the seemingly material decisions that we make are motivated, are guided, are in some way related to core fundamental beliefs that we articulate over the course of our lives. Now, because we are on the cusp of Martin Luther King Day, I chose an excerpt from one of his sermons that is not an expression of Jewish theology. Now, remember, in order to be an expression of Jewish theology, the person doesn't just have to be a theologian, the person has to be Jewish. So here's an example that I'm going to show for a moment of a theology that I believe is highly personal, that is an expression of one of the leading Christian theologians in American history. And this is a bit of an ode to Martin Luther King Jr. And first, I have to get it up on the screen. Let's see. You're going to see it. You're going to see something else first. It's actually Menachem Creditor, and then I will get it up for us.
know, I printed it out.
Okay. Does everyone see the words, I would not conclude? I would not conclude without applying the meaning of the text to the nature of God.
Yes.
The greatness, thank you, the greatness of our God lies in the fact that he, notice the description of God here is both tough-minded and tender-hearted. He has qualities both of austerity and of gentleness. The Bible, always clear in stressing both attributes of God, expresses his tough-mindedness in his justice and wrath, and his tender-heartedness in his love and grace. God has two outstretched arms. One is strong enough to surround us with justice, and one is gentle enough to embrace us with grace. On the one hand, God is a God of justice who punished Israel for her wayward deeds. And on the other hand, he is a forgiving father whose heart was filled with unutterable joy when the prodigal returned home. I am thankful that we worship a God who is both tough-minded and tender-hearted. If God were only tough-minded, he would be a cold, passionless despot sitting in some far-off heaven contemplating all. As Tennyson put it in The Palace of Art, he would be Aristotle's unmoved mover, self-knowing but not other-loving. But if God were only tender-hearted, he would be too soft and sentimental to function when things go wrong, and incapable of controlling what he has made. He would be like H.G. Wells' lovable God in God the Invisible King, who is strongly desirous of making a good world, but finds himself helpless before the surging powers of evil. God is neither hard-hearted nor soft-minded. He is tough-minded enough to transcend the world. He is tender-hearted enough to live in it. He does not leave us alone in our agonies and struggles. He seeks us in dark places and suffers with us and for us in our tragic prodigality. Just a little more. At times we need to know the Lord is a God of justice. When slumbering giants of injustice emerge in the earth, we need to know that there is a God of power who can cut them down like the grass and leave them withering like the green herb. When our most tireless efforts fail to stop the surging sweep of oppression, we need to know that in this universe is a God whose matchless strength is a fit contrast to the sordid weakness of man. But there are also times when we need to know that God possesses love and mercy, when we are staggered by the chilly winds of adversity and battered by the raging storms of disappointment, and when, through our folly and sin, we stray into some destructive far country and are frustrated because of a strange feeling of homesickness. We need to know that there is someone who loves us, cares for us, understands us, and will give us another chance. When days grow dark and nights grow dreary, we can be thankful that our God combines in his nature a creative synthesis of love and justice, which will lead us through life's dark valleys and into sunlit pathways of hope and fulfillment. I found that to be particularly beautiful. A friend of mine who is actually the head of the largest public publisher for Black churches in the United States. His name is Reverend Jeff Wright, who is a dear friend, sent me this book, The Strength to Love. It's a series of sermons by Martin Luther King Jr., and what we read is an excerpt from it. Just to me, another kind of spellbinding example of how one articulates a personal theology. Questions, comments, concerns? Yes, Alan.
Well, not only is it God that is tough-minded and tender-hearted, it is us that should be living life through both mechanisms. And what you read from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I have heard from rabbis from a long time ago that it is reflected in the fact that when we lay tefillin, we're laying it on our arms, which really it connects to the heart, and laying it on our heads, which has to our brain. And the fact is that you can't live life through only your head or only through your heart. It has to be both.
Beautiful. I wholeheartedly agree. And give me a second here. I think that one of the reasons that I wish to excerpt from Martin Luther King Jr.'s sermon, in addition to its timeliness, is to demonstrate that theology being personal is not restricted to Jews. It is, if we can show examples from Muslim theology, from Shinto theology, from Buddhist theology, that yes, there are theologians with a capital T. There are, giants of theology. But my hope is that, if nothing else, this series of 4 sessions will empower each of you, each of us, and will enable each of us to feel as though we can be theologians too. And we just need to consider our own lives, who has shaped them, and how is it that we carry some of our childlike self with us, our teenage self with us, our young adult self with us, and that we are kind of theological movies that are always in evolving. One of the ways that I am suggesting that's possible relates to the very last page, I think, that you should have in your evolving theology. Let's see, let me find it. It should be from an expression of Rabbi Lawrence Kushner that everybody has a Torah. You just need to find it. Where is it here? All right, I'm going to find it, and I will put it up on the screen in a moment. That's not it. Okay, where is it? Maybe it's here. Okay. Yes, here it is. Okay. I will now put it up. I think this is it. Okay. I think actually this was ultimately excerpted and included in Mishkan Tfilah, but I am not positive of that. So I'm just sharing it at the moment here. And this is, especially if someone's curiosity is piqued. I think I mentioned the last session that in speaking with Rabbi Blake, he is open to the prospect of having people who are in this course share something of their personal theologies on Shavuot at WRT. And I will make sure that everybody has a copy of this if you don't. But here is the challenge and invitation that can relate to even your own expression of theology on Shavuot. Each person has a Torah unique to that person, his or her innermost teaching. Some seem to know that Torah very early in life and speak and sing it in myriad ways. Others spend their whole lives stammering, shaping, and rehearsing it. Some are long and some are short. Some are intricate and poetic. Others are only a few words, and still others can be spoken through gesture and example. But every soul has a Torah. To hear another person say Torah is a precious gift. And so the question that you may wish to ponder, not only in the context of this course, but in general, is what's your Torah? What is it that emerges from you that is an expression of your personal theology?
Can I make a comment?
Of course.
Yeah, Norman Weiss here. I was
Yes.
just thinking about Reverend King's commentary, and it seems to me that is, in my opinion, more of a wish than an established concept, simply because considering all the bad things that happen in the world over millennia, that's a God of weakness. What he was describing was that a God who did not have a strong arm to provide justice. I mean, where was the justice in the Shoah or 100 other comparable examples? So I'd like you to comment on
that. Sure. Let me write. I'm going to write that down, and I think I will take first Russell and then Audrey. Okay.
Well, thank you very much. I have great admiration for Dr. King, but I have to say that particular description of God leaves me absolutely cold. One of the things that frustrates me about all faiths is, number one, the need to anthropomorphize God, putting aside the male-female thing, which I don't particularly care about. The idea that head and heart are godly qualities at all is something that troubles me. And the idea that they are opposites, that one of them is stern and the other is soft and caring. One of them metes out punishment and the other metes out rewards. I think this binary depiction of God is so facile. Can we conceive of a God that really transcends all of those factors of rationality, all of those factors of emotion? My favorite depiction of God is when the Torah says that God appears in a cloud.
Beautiful. Thank you. I will seek to respond to each of your most worthy comments. Audrey? And then
I have a problem with a lot of this, but specifically the last excerpt that said that everybody has a Torah. Some of us have been, well, at least I have been struggling my entire life to find one that works for me. And I understand, I sort of anticipated your saying choose life would be the sermon you would give, but I have spent hours and hours and hours debating this with my late mother. My parents were German Jewish refugees, and we kept discussing, could there be a God? would there be a God? And at one point, my father even made a comment, although he didn't share much. And it's very hard. I keep thinking when you said choose life, my immediate thought was, don't you think the people who went to the gas chambers would have chosen life? And I have a really hard, I admire anybody who can feel that way, but I have a really, really hard time with it. And when Martin Luther King talks about justice, I just can't somehow absorb it, I guess is the right word. And I have a real problem. I'm still struggling. I don't know how to formulate something that I'm comfortable with and feel that I could really believe in. And it's not a comfortable feeling not to have a belief.
Judith.
I agree with Russell. It really bothered me that there was a person doing all these miraculous things, and a person that I would devote my heart and love to. It's so complicated. I think initially the word God is tough. It's a name. It's like, it's describing something that is so vast and so philosophical to a word. And that's why people say, oh, I don't believe in God. I'm not going to go to your services. What does belief in God mean? And I don't have anything specific other than I am also like Audrey, I'm working on this. And I have a Jewish neshama. I was brought up by Yiddish-speaking parents, and I say I'm Jewish in my heart, and I have and love to me is the biggest word of all, and I don't take it simplistically, where I think God is sort of a simplistic word, but it's all very tough. The other thing is I do some studying with my son-in-law in Hindu scripture, and it's the brain that's creating it is your autobiography because it's coming from your head. It's coming, you have to open your eyes and see what's ahead of you. If you close your eyes, there's nothing there. I don't know, there's just it's so intricate, but I think it's very much worth working on.
Well, this really, from my perspective, and I'll, begin with Norman all the way through, or try to address each of you who spoke so beautifully and meaningfully, and I hope that I will do each of you justice. Never mind God. When Rabbi Blake and I were contemplating different possibilities for a course, I suggested developing a personal theology. You know why? Because he said, I need it. And my sense is, without it all being flippant, or let's see, why is not everyone muted? I don't know. Okay. That each, to an extent, I can agree with every single thing that each of you has said. I wasn't at any point, whether it's with Rabbi Geller, or most recently with Rabbi Kushner, or with Dr. King, seeking to, this isn't like a court in which I'm arguing or defending a particular theologian or a particular perspective. And I suspect it's the case that each of the pieces that we have looked at already, and even from my own life, I may say it differently, at the age of 69 as I am now, from what I said when I was 27 in that interview at the community synagogue. We're all, I hope, works in process, and sometimes we're even works in progress. We grow, but not always. Sometimes we regress, and that can be not just physically and, reversals in business, but it can be reversals in intellect and reversals in theology. For me, I chose, and there are many other pieces I could have chosen from MLK, from Martin Luther King, but it may very well have been a moment of weakness when he wrote that. Sometimes we give sermons not for anybody else other than ourselves. I confess there are definitely times I've written sermons for Jan, hoping that somebody else in the kahal, somebody else in the congregation may also have needed that or wanted that or been open to that sermon. Now, that's not all the time. That would be totally solipsistic, totally narcissistic, only to speak to what I cared about, for example. But with respect to the sermon with King, remember of the injustices that he himself privately and publicly endured. And I think that he was expressing that despite all of those, despite the evidence, despite the life experiences that he personally had and endured and struggled with, he wanted and felt as though he needed to believe in this God, and he did believe in a personal God. Now, we're going to see with Brad Artson. Brad Artson totally rejects a personal God. Rachel Adler totally rejects a personal God, doesn't relate to God as a father, as a parent, as a king, or any of these monikers that exist in our liturgy. And so we also mentioned, I think last time, Abraham Joshua Heschel. Abraham Joshua Heschel's God is not, and I'm going to use a couple of fancy words here and try to explain them, is not anthropomorphic, but is anthropopathic, because that's a God who feels. Abraham Joshua Heschel's God is a God who has emotions. That is how he can relate to God. Isaac Luria's God is a God of mystery, and the God who defies logic, who isn't reducible to language, who says that the whole Bible is basically one word. One. And he seeks, among other things, you probably know that the largest letter in the Torah, according to scribal convention, is the Daled in the word Echad, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. So that word Echad means one, unique, etc. And if you were to read somebody like Arthur Green, who is a contemporary theologian and most closely identified, at least until relatively recently, with Hebrew College in Boston, and as the leader of Hebrew College in Boston, focuses on that one word. One of his great works of theology is called Seek Me and Live, and it's basically around the word echad. What is this expression of uniqueness that defies logic? So there are multiple points of entry, and what I'm hopeful, and maybe this may be misguided, I don't know, although I'll be very candid with you. I taught theology at HUC in Cincinnati to rabbinical students, cantorial students, students in education, and I'm relating to you as though you are them. This isn't a course for adult learners who are volunteers, and we were all struggling with this. We were all wrestling with how in the world can somebody believe in and find expression that is at all satisfying to the existence of a being that transcends all that we know. What's happening? I'm trying to figure out why that. Looks like everybody's muted, but I'm hearing an echo.
Judy's phone is not muted.
There it is. Judy. Judy, I just muted you so that I hope you can hear me, but we're hearing echoes, or I was hearing echoes at the very least. But I hope that you can hear me responding. So, not because I was endorsing Martin Luther King, but if that was something you could relate to the God who sometimes is powerful and sometimes is kind, if that speaks to you, great. If it doesn't, or it doesn't today, know that that is somebody's legitimate struggle that person has expressed, in this case, a great Christian leader and theologian who we are going to be honoring in this country on Monday. Is this the only thing that he said about God? No. Is this the best? I don't know. But this was something that struck me, and I just wanted to offer a piece of it in this particular context. Too facile. Maybe it is the case that each of these expressions, that as soon as you say anything, you have kind of lessened or reduced one's understanding. That is another position, by the way, that's entirely legitimate, not only Jewish with respect to theology. And George, I did see your hand raised, and I will come back to you, I promise, that there are those who feel that they're kind of reduced to saying, ugh, because as soon as they were to articulate a word, that already is limiting and defining. By the way, one of the reasons that it's been so difficult classically to answer the question, who is a Jew or what is a Jew, is that we defy all kinds of definitions. There are people who wanted to make Jews a race, are Jews a people, are Jews a religious community. The Reform movement has struggled with it since its inception. At one point, we said, we are no longer a people. We're done with this peoplehood. We don't have a common language. We don't meet the definition of a people. We don't have a country of our own. And on and on and on. This is in the late 19th century. And they said, oh, maybe we are a people. And what we're having, I hope, is an ongoing, yes, sometimes frustrating, but also sometimes enlightening and compelling, and yes, confusing. All of those words in the poll, all of those words, from my perspective, that each of you expressed in relation to Laura Geller's article, all were legitimate, appropriate responses. It's possible that for somebody, an article that's compelling is confusing to another person in the same room. That's why, from my perspective, I never teach a class. Never. I'm teaching however many people there are, or trying to. Every one of you is a world. Every one of you has your own autobiography, and you either do or do not come to terms with, hopefully, one or more of the expressions of theology that has been expressed. The idea of God being in a cloud is an entirely Judaic theology, and Maimonides wrote about this God. Maimonides at one point, however, said, nope, the only way we can describe God is in negatives. You cannot describe God as kind, just, loving, caring, compassionate. All of these are limiting God. And instead, you can only use negatives in terms of describing God's attributes. And for some people, that is a compelling theological perspective. And God, somewhat like contemporary or 20th and 21st century physics, God is in the field. God is in a cloud. We can't specifically place God in a particular vessel in any way, that God is not possible to contain. in Jewish mysticism, I mentioned the name already, Isaac Luria, and it is actually included in I think the very first page of the packet that you received, that yes, God, that it's number 3 under what's called enduring understandings. Creation may have begun with a divine act of contraction.
You're right. It was the previous week.
I do not know what just happened. Somebody spoke and, okay. That one of the ways in Jewish thought, in Jewish mysticism in particular, is that God can limit God's self. God can withdraw into God's self and allow human beings to act, including to make mistakes, including to, in response in part to the question about the Shoah, that wasn't God. That was God allowing human beings to be inhumane, to human beings to dehumanize. Whether that is a satisfying theology, I can't answer that. But if we were studying right now Holocaust theology, one of the theologies that we would be looking at would say, no, that wasn't God. That was not God allowing it to happen. That was not God making the Shoah happen. That is not a perspective that at least resonates with classical Jewish theology. That is God saying, I have, as it were, God has a relationship with human beings that allows God to withdraw into God to make room for people. And sometimes people will do things, think of, and it, by the way, it comes from a very feminine metaphor of contraction, of of giving birth. That God giving birth to the world, as it were, according to a particular view of Jewish mysticism, allows God to contract and then expand, contract and then expand, and ultimately giving birth to a being, in this case, all human beings, that then are empowered to act in multiple ways. And I mean, I see what Russell is writing and others are writing. That you are individually and collectively a very learned, very wise group. And so I know that, this is not like tennis in which I can just parry and hit back and and volley in some way. And I do believe, and Judith, I think, said it at the very end, that this is nonetheless as frustrating, as perplexing, as agonizing, as difficult, as confusing, as confounding as this process is. It's worth it. It's holy. It is what enables us to be qualitatively somehow little less than the angels in the rabbinic idiom. What I am going to do now is ask us to turn, if you have that passage called Developing a Personal Theology, to look at key terms. It's on the bottom of page 1. These are, now this is all about convention, all right? This is agreement based upon generations of theologians who are at least seeking to give some expression, some voice to different understandings of what God could be. Theism. Theism is a belief that God is, as it says here, immanent and transcendent. That means God is, another way of saying it is God is wholly same and God is wholly other. God is beyond all human understanding and also intimate, most intimate, knows us in a way that sometimes we do not even know ourselves. Henotheism. This, if you want to think of the passage in every service probably that you've ever attended. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai. Who is like you among the gods who are worshipped? By the way, that is not a question. There's an exclamation. It's not like, oh, it's not like take a poll. Which of the gods is like you? That it's not, it's not an inquiry. He's not doing research. It's not theological research. That is an expression of all the gods that are worshipped, there is none like you. Ein kamocha. You are unique. That's the echad. You are singular. You are beyond anything else that exists. And henotheism is expressed to an extent in mi chamocha, because one of the issues in terms of Jewish theology has been, did monotheism, the belief in a single God, did that just happen like an eruption? Did it just happen in an immediate sense, or was it an evolution theologically? And henotheism is an expression of the belief that monotheism took time. Just like, for example, it took time to wean the Jewish people away from animal sacrifice. But that there was once a belief, and Micha Mocha may express it, that there was an acknowledgement of the existence of multiple gods, but there was a God that was qualitatively superior to all of the other gods. Am I being clear? It's an important distinction between theism and henotheism. And you may want to take a look next time you're at services, Micha Mocha. And sometimes the composers of music around Micha Mocha were quite aware of this being an expression of henotheism. And you'll see sometimes the confusion in Mishkan Tfilah, in other Sidurim. Sometimes they will have a question mark after that. And sometimes they will have an exclamation point after that. So that, even in the question mark or the exclamation point, that's a theological expression. The question mark is a theology. And the exclamation point is a theology. I tend to believe, personally, in terms of education, one of my goals in education, and I taught education again for a few decades at HUC, was I took it as a personal challenge to turn exclamation points into question marks. I think that is a school of parenting. I think that is a school of education. I get worried, and this is again very personal, I get concerned when anybody is absolutely certain about what they believe. This is it. That scares me. This is what a Jew is. This is what's right. This is what's right. Like, oh, okay. What can we do to not tell you you're wrong, but at least open you up to the possibility that you might be wrong? I almost think that whenever I say anything, I would like to add the words, I could be wrong. Because I know in my mind that, not in my guts and in my soul, I could be wrong about anything that I say. And I think that what we're looking at here, just in terms of the key terms, is maybe helpful in terms of communication so that we can understand each other with respect to theology. I know there are a couple of other hands, and I promise get to you, but I want to get through the key terms first. Polytheism, a belief in multiple gods. That is still quite common. That is not something that existed only in the ancient contexts. Belief in two gods. This is one of the things, by the way, that Martin Luther King was speaking to and against. That because there are many people, not just Gnostic dualists, not just Zoroastrians, but many people who say, well, when evil happens, that's the God of darkness. When good happens, that's the God of light. And they may not say that out loud, but that's what they say to themselves. What, in part, Martin Luther King was speaking against was dualism. We have a whole lot of binaries in our world. Male or female, you got to be one or the other. Well, not so fast, maybe. Old or young, got to be one or the other. Well, man, not so fast. So it seems to me that while some of these things we may relegate to, oh, come on, no one really thinks that anymore. Not so sure, at least not in my limited perspective. Deism, that's another classic belief that God created the world and then God said, okay, you're on your own now. So that's different from the kind of withdrawal that was the mystical withdrawal of Isaac Luria saying God allowed the world to be created. This is a God who said, Yotzer Oru Vore Choshech, that God who creates light and darkness. And by the way, I'm done now. That's if you want to stop your worship, if you want to stop the service after Yotzer Oru Vore Choshech. See ya. None of this God of love, God, no, God is done. God has done God's work, and now everything is up to us. That is a belief in deism. Agnosticism, belief that it is impossible to know whether God exists or not. And that is also entirely a legitimate Judaic or certainly Judaic belief. And there are theologians, famous theologians and not so famous theologians in Jewish thought who have expressed agnosticism. Some of you may know that different surveys were done of Reform rabbis, conservative rabbis, Orthodox rabbis at various points in even in the last generation. And there was a very, very, very high percentage of Reform rabbis who identified as agnostics. Atheism, a belief that there is no God or gods, not one and not many. Atheist. Pantheist, belief that God and the universe are coterminous. They're the same. And if you have ever studied Spinoza, for example, you may have read that definitely there are those who understood that he was a pantheist. He simply equated all of the universe with God. And then there are those who argue that he was a panentheist, which is the last term here, belief that the universe is in God. God is greater than the universe. And that the universe is contained within God. And defenders of Spinoza, who are Jewish, tended to interpret him as a panentheist. Why? Because, as you may know, the Jewish community excommunicated Spinoza for Spinoza's belief. And those who are Jewish who wanted to reclaim Spinoza, not just, by the way, for historical purposes, but quite frankly, in many instances, for their own purposes, for themselves, because that's what they believe as well. So you're saying if you're going to exile that guy, then I guess I'm out because that's what I think. What I hope is becoming clearer is that theology is this ongoing conversation with people who have vastly, not just diverse beliefs, but even divergent beliefs. That is to say, not just different from one another, but opposed to one another. There are multiple conflicting, opposing narratives, all of which, each of which is an expression of Jewish theology. if this was a course in Holocaust theology or a course in queer theology, then we would be challenging the I don't know, many of the conventions of theology, because within, for example, Holocaust theology, there are those who have argued that, for example, God is dead. Jewish theologians. God died at Auschwitz. That's almost a direct quote from a person, Richard Rubenstein is his name, was his name. I mean, no, he's no longer alive. He was actually a rabbi in my hometown prior to my birth, in Brockton, Massachusetts, a conservative rabbi who who wrote many books and challenged conventions in Jewish theology. And then if I mentioned queer theology, that is a domain in which, for example, people who are queer say there has not been or feminist theology, by the way, prior to it, that women were written out of the Torah, queers were written out of the Torah. We want them back in. We want, so if you read, I mentioned, I think, Judith Plaskow last time, Judith Plaskow, who wrote a book entitled Standing Again at Sinai. Wait a minute, we were there too? We are going to change the way that classically men have read the Torah because we are in it. We want to be in it, and we want our own relationships with God. And that's why when we, for example, read the Avot and Imahot, and by the way, here's another expression of personal theology. Why doesn't it say the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the God of Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah? It doesn't. Each one, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Rachel, the God of Leah, because each one had a unique relationship. You may have been, as it were, the same God in some sense, but because of the relationship of imperfect, incomplete human beings, mortal beings, our relationships are all going to be our own. So it's autobiographical in multiple contexts, from multiple perspectives. It can only be our own. So for me to try to convince you, oh no, this is what MLK really meant, or this is what Rabbi Laura Geller really meant, it's absurd. That's ridiculous, because each one of us is going to make meaning that connects our autobiography with whoever the other theologian is at that particular moment. And by the way, that other theologian can be your child, or your spouse, or your sibling, or your rabbi, or any one of us can have, well, I just don't read it that way. That's not how I understand it. And that is legit. What I hope is happening is that over the course of our time together, you find yourself in some, that you're able to communicate and, if not commune, with some other person who also is seeking to struggle with and engage in words of Torah in relationship to God. George, are you? Yes, George, and then Barbara.
No, it's okay. We've covered a lot. Thank you.
Barbara. Sorry, George.
I just wanted to know if you make enthusiasm to questioning, do you also do the opposite and have somebody who questions embrace enthusiasm? I don't know if enthusiasm was the right word that you used, but
I'm just thinking. To the extent that I would hope that education is a growth process. I think education is, for me, this balancing. I'm thinking now one of my teachers, Mike Rosenack, who no longer alive, but was a professor of education at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, wrote about the difference between openness and commitment. And the first thing I try to do as an educator is to create an environment that encourages openness to growing, to thinking differently about something, to creating dissonance. Another educator was also I'd say an educator and psychologist, Festiger, wrote about, in the 1950s, he wrote about the need for creating dissonance in learning, that you learn when you create disequilibrium, that somebody comes in with an idea, and what you seek to do is, as an educator, you seek not to convince the person that they were wrong, but that they could be wrong and that they should consider other conceptions, other possibilities. Think about Schoenberg in music, how, well, why do we have to have an 8-tone? Why can't we have a 12-tone scale? Why can't we have quarter tones? We can. Or this happens in physics. It comes back to the cloud that Russell mentioned earlier, that, well, maybe we don't know exactly where that part of an atom is, but we know it's what area it's in. We know about where it is. That we can't be precise like Newton thought, but we can project an element of a field like Einstein or Heisenberg thought. That in every field there is, including theology, there is a need to sort of engage in an ongoing dance, really, between thinking we know exactly and, well, maybe it's in that area. Maybe it's not in a particular space, but it's messier, it's cloudier.
So you're saying
That's
continue
part
the
of the
question.
process.
So you're saying
So I think it's an ongoing dance between feeling comfortable and feeling uncomfortable. Again, back to, in this case, Abraham Joshua Heschel. How did he describe the job of a rabbi, of a Jewish leader? He said, well, it's to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. It's both. If you're comfortable, I don't want you to be too comfortable. But if you're uncomfortable, I do want you to be comforted. And, I know that this sounds, it may sound incondite, it may sound simplistic or reductionist, but, and I may be giving, that MLK piece too much credit. But for me, I was trying to think of something that was less of speaking to the crowd at Washington or at Selma, and to provide something that was speaking to himself. What inner conversation is he having? The sermon that I'm going to be giving on Friday night is not about I have a dream. He gave a sermon in which he argued for the importance of shattered dreams. I actually think in some ways, for me, at this point in my life, that is a more compelling sermon. How does a person live with shattered dreams? Why is it important not to say, and this is, by the way, it's a children's service. Why is it important on Friday that I be involved in? Why is it important that young children know how to lose? Why is it important for somebody to be able to learn at least as much from failure as it is success, whether that's on a test or a job interview or being crushed that you didn't get into your favorite school that you wanted to go to for college? I think theologically that having the ability to live with and defy but not deny shattered dreams is a wonderful drasha that he gets. Just a beautiful, beautiful message from Martin Luther King. But there, I assure you, there are going to be a whole lot more people who will be speaking about I have a dream speech than I have a shattered dream speech. But it's important to know that the same person gave both, at least to me. He wasn't just about shattered dreams, but he also wasn't just about dreams. I want to make sure before we conclude that we take a look at Bradley Artson. Artson is somebody, I hope, who will resonate, especially with those who said, God isn't a person to me. I don't relate to a personal God. He does not relate to a personal God, Brad Artson. He is part of a movement in theology called process theology. Any of you may have heard the name Mordechai Kaplan, who very often is described as the founder of something that he didn't know that he was founding, the Reconstructionist movement. And if he were alive now, I suspect he may not recognize the Reconstructionist movement at all. But just like if Isaac Mayer Wise showed up or Stephen Wise showed up, I doubt at WRT, I doubt that they would say that this is the Reform movement as they had understood it. But be that as it may, I just want to be clear that I wasn't in any way derogating the Reconstructionist movement. But Mordechai Kaplan was a process theologian, denied the notion of God being a person, and argued that God is a force for salvation. And Brad Artson, contemporary theologian out of Los Angeles, University of Judaism or American Jewish University, believed doctorate from HUC, wrote this book entitled God of Becoming. And the epilogue of this book is quite personal. And as I said, is an ode, in a sense, to his son who has autism. Okay. Okay, here we go. I hope everybody can see this, and even if you can't, I hope that you received the text already. 1 second. All right. On a personal level, everybody see that? On a personal level, I believe that what the future entails is that we continue as ourselves beyond death. Our existence is real, and God knows everything possible to know and knows it eternally. That means that God knows us eternally, which is how I understand Chaye Ha'olam Haba, life in the coming world. We exist continually in God, which turns out to be how we've always existed. My understanding of process metaphysics affirmed that too. For years, Jacob, that's his son, I tried to mobilize people to take seriously the commandments of the sovereign. Truth be told, it never worked very well. Few people thought that God actually spoke these words or those words in the first place, and life was demanding enough as it was. Fear rarely motivates observance. But my process friends helped me find words for a deeper truth I already intuit. That effective commanding is an expression of love and is inspired by education, not by fear or by force. Jacob, I would do anything for you, for your sister, for your mother, not because I fear you, but because I love you so much. If we are in covenant with God, then we recognize the mitzvot as compelling, not because of some external authority or threat, but because of the extent of the love, the marvel, the wonder of our finding ourselves alive in the cosmos as Jews. The closer the relationship, the more compelling and numerous are the ways of enacting that intimacy. If we Jews seek closeness to God in covenant, small surprise that we count the ways of living the love in the hundreds of mitzvot that make our lives holy and link our way to those of our ancestors and the wisdom of our tradition. God so loved Israel that God surrounded them with mitzvot, tefillin on their arms and heads, tzitzit on their garments, and the mezuzah on their doors. Far from becoming merely optional or folk ways, the mitzvot in this understanding gain an irreplaceable urgency that embodies delight, companionship in times of joy and sorrow, at our waking and throughout our days. Precisely because God's power is not coercive, we need not focus on resisting an imposition. God's power is persuasive, and the mitzvot are God's teaching tools for a life rich in perspective, resilience, and joy. Scripture speaks of a kol demama daka, a small, still voice. I think that's what process thinkers mean by the lure. We sense that our intuition is God's lure when it is life-affirming, when it calls us to more emphatic relating, more compassionate justice, solidarity expressed through engagement, more expansive love. If you ever find yourself summoned to be small or stingy, know that this voice is not God's, and try not to let it distract you, my beloved son. What all this means is that your future is not fixed. You are not defined by your label. Remember, autism. God works in, with, through you. So your decisions, day by day and step by step, can open up a future that you would never have thought possible. Indeed, that previously wasn't possible. We have already seen how your steady determination to communicate and to control your behavior has led to your having mastered challenges beyond anyone's expectations. We have seen that God's love is stronger than anything, not as something separate that beams down from above, but as a steady, inspiring capability you have within, and which you also derive from the women and men who embody and convey God's love. People like Dr. Ricky Robinson and Darlene Hanson, like those teachers who believed in you and inspired you to rise to your highest potential. And above all, people like your Ima, whose love for you won't take no for an answer. Not from the bureaucrats who wanted to put you on a shelf, not from the Jewish institutions that thought that showing us pity while treating you as invisible was the civilized option, not from the educators who pressed us to settle for life skills, or the people who glared at us at parks, restaurants, airports, and pools for daring to live our lives in the light. Your mother, like my mother, too, models God's liberating, uncompromising, insistent love, the kind of love that brings pharaohs down and liberates slaves. Small wonder that when I pray to God, I often use God's female names. Rahamama, a formally masculine word to be sure, but one redolent of rechem, God's womb-like qualities. Shekhinah, Chochmah, Binah. My friend, Rabbi Judith Edelman Green, shared with me a new name for God, coined by Aya, one of her students with special needs in Israel. That child, calls God Elohima, because God's love is like her mother. There is wisdom in us all. Again, I don't know about you. I can't know about you. Sometimes I don't know about me. But I love that. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with process theology, but my God, he could be, I could be in that conversation for my life. And I don't know if Brad Artson and his theology speak to you, just like I don't know that about me or about Abraham Joshua Heschel or Laura Geller, or the Psalms, whether it's 139 or 89 or any of the specific prayers and texts that we've looked at. But when you find yourself, if you find yourself crying like I feel like I am, or smiling, that's what we're after. It isn't for intellectual apprehension. It isn't for knowing henotheism and agnosticism and being able to differentiate them. That is a head game. That is a process of intellection. It's worthy, but no one's getting a grade in this course. The meaning of this course, to me, and the reason that I agreed to seek to offer it, is hopefully to open up some of our minds, hearts, and souls to other people who are willing to be both powerful and vulnerable. Very often we think of those as antitheses to one another, as opposites. They're not. Powerful and vulnerable coexist in each of us. And not just in each of us, but I would say, quite frankly, that's the lesson, to me, one of the lessons that the United States is learning, and God knows Israel is learning as well. When you think you're powerful, sometimes that's when you're most vulnerable. That was the sermon I wrote after October 7th, and I was in Israel on October 7th, 2023. It's when you learn that, or one comes to realize that just when we think we figured it out, we haven't. And hopefully that's an invitation to continue in this process, and to be accompanied by some of these other wonderful voices, male and female, binary, non-binary, alive, no longer alive, still alive, alive again, people who I think, I'd like to believe, I choose to believe, are all on the same journey. We are really about to conclude, so my hope is that next time we will continue again from the pages and also from some other texts, but hopefully mostly from the pages that you already have. I hope that this is something that, unlike, this isn't Las Vegas. What we talk about here is not supposed to stay here. It's supposed to go with you in your life, and maybe with people who you love, having a conversation or more conversations with them about, it may not be directly about God, it might be about your relationship with the people who you're closest to in your life. And look, I'm grateful for each of you and the opportunity to learn again with me, as I'm learning from each of you, what speaks to us. And one of the phrases that to me is most compelling in terms of Jewish thought is that words that emanate from the heart of one penetrate the hearts of others. I hope it's the case that each of our hearts has been opened by each other and by the other theologians that we have brought into our shared learning and experience. I hope that each of you has a very sweet Shabbat, Shabbat that is peaceful and enjoyable with people who you care about deeply, and that some of the messages, whether it's this one, the one that we shared today, or others of Martin Luther King, resonate and hopefully prove meaningful yet again as we celebrate in this country. Someone who was seeking to be, and for some clearly was and is, a prophet. Thank you so much, and look forward to seeing you again next week. Take care.
Thank you very much.